sort of.
Welcome to Beyond Fringe, an organic podcast discussing the topics beyond the fringe of this or any other reality. On this podcast, we explore cryptids, paranormal activity, lost legends, aliens, government conspiracies, historic mysteries, lost treasures, and forbidden archaeology. I'm the Cryptid Guy, and with me as always is my co-host, Daniel Hurst, a.k.a. Tiny. Together, we explore the world beyond Fringe.
Today's episode, we're going to continue talking about the Dogman and his friends. So, Tiny, when we ended our last episode, we were talking about basically what we think Dogman is. I am in the opinion it's an organic being, but I'm also of the mind that it's possibly, in a paranormal sense, a herald of things to come. And we were discussing that a little bit. Is there anything you want to add on that before we start moving into encounters?
Well, I have a little curiosity about him being a herald. What do you mean by that? Like a Mothman type herald?
Something like that, like a herald. Kind of like the old mythos of a hellhound going in and checking out the area before the boss arrives, that kind of thing. That's kind of, I've heard people say that before, that they think it's kind of like almost an ambassador to something worse to come. So, I mean, there's always that little paranormal twist on it. So, we got to put everything in the possibility realm.
What if he is kind of a hellhound? And, because we're obviously starting the end days here, if you believe that way.
Well, like I said, that's not in the realm of possibility. I don't necessarily believe that it is, but it could be. And if it is, we're in trouble.
That's a scary thought.
At least I won't have to pay off my Sallie Mae student loans.
True enough.
True enough. Yes, sir. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some of the sighting reports that we've had this year. As I said, I've had an uptick in pretty much every report, but more especially in Dogman. And I know earlier, I think in Chapter 1, we talked about how I had Dogman reports on several churches. And we briefly touched on burial grounds and things of that nature. Is there anything on that we need to add, you think?
I don't think so, but listeners, if there's anything you want to hear about or anything you think we should add to that, please let us know.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we can be reached at any time on beyondfringe001@gmail.com. We answer that. It goes to both of us, so we both get it, so we'll answer as soon as we get it. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, we can arrange that too. Or if you have some cool topics you want to discuss, feel free. Send us an email. And again, back to the Dogman issue. I was listening to some other podcasts, and it's like Dogman is really starting to take off.
Yeah.
Everyone with a decent podcast, in my opinion, has been at least doing one or two dedicated podcasts to the Dogman aspect. And I think we're kind of at an advantage on that, because we've been talking about Dogman since we've been, since our first podcast. That was a couple of years ago. So I think everyone else is just catching up to us. Right. So maybe we're trendsetters.
Well, and then there's that. I mean, it's just kind of new popularity with Dogman. So everybody's just now learning about it. And like I say, I'd never heard about him until I talked to you, and I've been into this thing, this type of thing my entire life.
I understand. I am a trendsetter. I invented the Hawaiian shirt look with shorts, and everyone stole it, saying it was theirs. But no, it was me. I'm with you. No, but I think it also goes down to what we see regionally, too.
Yeah.
Because regionally, I get a lot of reports of him. And like I said, I'm a firm believer that they follow the Appalachian Trail. Mm-hmm. And they migrate. I think just like our hairy friend Bigfoot does, I think they both migrate. And I think they use the trail systems. And why wouldn't they? That'd be the easiest thing to do. Okay. And, we're going to do a whole podcast down the road on my version of what I like to call the cryptid triangle and the cryptid cave system theory that I have. So we'll get into that more. But I'm just to briefly gloss on that. I'm a firm believer that these creatures use the Appalachian Trail to go north and south. But I also think to go east to west, there's a huge, massive tunnel system that they follow. And I think that if you look at it the way we've been looking at it and studying the things we look at as far as cave systems, how deep things are, and caverns and things like that, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Well, and you told me too that wasn't it where Patton Avenue is, that's a very ancient
highway.
highway.
It's ancient highway. That's what that was referred to as the ancient highway. So you never know. You never know. Like I said, the Cherokee Nation's been in this area for 14,000 years. So Lord knows what was here before them. Something was.
Something was.
And something was here before. Something's going to be here after us.
True enough.
True enough. Yes. So I've got a very strange report of a dogman that was in a church. And he was seen there 3 nights in a row by the same guy. And he said he didn't feel scared. He said it was actually, as he watched it all 3 nights, right about the same time, he said it would come out of this area with a lot of trees and bushes on church grounds. The reason why he could see this is because his house was directly across the street.
Right.
In fact, from what I understand, his house used to be part of the church's property. So I think the original church graveyard actually extends onto his property. And he said it's all like old chain and how they used to make fences with granite. They'd put a little piece of granite and put a hole through it and put a chain through it. He said he's got some of that on his property. So he said he watches this thing come out at night. It does his business. It doesn't look like it's doing anything. He knows for a fact it knows he's there because it scented him. He's a hunter, and he said he saw this thing stick its nose up in the air, take a couple deep breaths, look over, and just, boom, looks directly at him. In fact, at one point, he said he even crouched back down on all fours and scurried back into the wood line. And then apparently this dog man's just kind of getting used to his presence. So he just does his business, and then he sees this guy disappear in the church grounds, and he comes out about the same time every night. My thing is this. Do you think he's got a den there? Or do you think he's just staying there? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, for something to be in the same area at the same time consecutively like that, there's a reason for it. And a den is your first thought. Your second thought is hunting grounds, but I don't think that would necessarily be hunting grounds.
I'm wondering if there's like an old cave or something on the church property that no one's really cared to take a look at. And I wouldn't blame them. I mean, I wouldn't go looking for this thing during the daylight unless
It's entirely possible.
I mean, it could be a pack one. We don't know. Or it could be daddy going out hunting for mom and the kids. We don't know. But the funny thing is this the last time this report came in was in the early 70s where the same thing was reported. And this is like area? Same place. And this is what this guy told me. He said, I guess his father or his grandfather saw the same thing. We don't know. But it's a cool story, and I think people should be aware that these guys can show up anytime. Now, I'm not going to give specifics of where this is. I will tell you it is in western North Carolina, but I will also say this. It is adjacent to a national forest, of course. So there's plenty of room out there, which you and I are both firm believers that as long as there's enough room for everyone, there's going to be a little bit of everything there.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool story. We are actually signed up to investigate this probably the beginning of this next month. He wants us to come out there and take a look. So I'm kind of hoping that the weather will clear up a little bit as far as rain. If we have any bad weather, hopefully we get snow. Yeah, because that'd be great. We get some good prints in snow. Oh, how cool would that be?
Yeah.
Some nice tracks in snow. So we will see. We will see.
Can't cast in snow though. That's
no, that's fine. But we will take plenty of pictures, and that's all we really need anyway. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of casting. I'm tired of carrying that stuff around. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what casting is, when you cast prints in plaster Paris, what are those boxes? 30 pounds each?
The ones we were getting were 4.
Oh, they were 4?
Yeah, but we carried 2.
And we carried 2 in the water, so it felt like 30 pounds. Well, man, it just shows you how weak I am.
Well, after a while, 8 pounds, it gets heavy, especially when you're carrying all the other stuff that we carry.
This is true. Tiny, as I flip through my book and I look at my maps here, and we are talking about Dogman, I think we owe it to our listeners to discuss what everyone's going to ask us about anyway. It's usually ground zero for Dogman activity, and that's Taylor, Mississippi. Now, you and I have talked about going out there many times.
Yeah.
And it's still, as I say this, I'm just looking at my map that I have. I actually have a map that was drawn by a witness that lives there. He's from there. And apparently, see these X's, Tiny? These are all sightings.
Yeah.
And this is following a river line. So this is just further evidence for us that we kind of think that Dogman follows, again, I'm a firm believer in Appalachian Trail, but I also think they follow river systems, and I also think that Sasquatch does the same thing. And the only reason why I even bring up Taylor, Mississippi is because Dark Waters, if you ever listen to Dark Waters, he's got a great horror podcast. Actually, he's got his own channel too. He's got everything. He's got his fingers and everything. And I love his stories. I think he's really good at what he does. But he's a firm believer in Taylor, Mississippi. From what I remember, I think if I'm wrong, correct me. But he actually had a Dogman incident there himself.
I think so, yeah.
And
isn't Taylor, Mississippi, where the Marines went missing?
I believe so. I was just about to talk about that. I don't know if they're Marines. Now, this is all alleged. We don't know. So let me preface that. All right, this is the hearsay we heard. All right, apparently there's a group of guys that got done. They heard a Dark Waters podcast or someone else's podcast. Again, I don't know. I'm not pointing fingers or saying anything. This is just what we've heard. Anyway, they got this information, and they were all 6 retired special forces, and they went to Taylor, Mississippi, all geared up, ready to go, and they were going to film everything, and they were going to tell everyone that they were coming back with proof. And they go into the woods, and then they completely disappeared. No one's ever heard from them. Now, again, this could be one of these folklore things. We don't know. I'm not saying it happened. Not saying it didn't. We don't know. We're not blaming finger. We're not pointing fingers. Not blaming anyone. We just don't know. This is just one of these things you hear in the cryptid community. It's a pretty popular story because I've heard it. I don't know how many times. Yeah. And they disappeared. So again, we don't know how true it is. It's one of those things you got to take with a grain of salt. But I don't think it would be wise to go to Taylor, Mississippi looking for Dogman, considering the fact that from what I've heard, they run like in massive packs out there. And you got 40 or 50 in a pack. That's probably a lot of trouble. Something you might want to think twice about. Your thoughts on that, Tiny?
I'm just trying to envision a pack of Dogman and how absolutely terrifying that would be.
Well, that honestly...
One's bad enough.
Well, two's bad enough, but think about 30 or 40. There was another story I heard on another podcast about an old farmer. He was very well aware of them, and he knew there was 20 or 30 of them out there at all times, and he would actually raise extra livestock because he like if he needed 30, he'd raise like 40 because he knew he was going to lose 10% of his livestock to the Dogman or his friendly visitors. But on the uptick with that, apparently it kept poachers and hunters off his land because they knew who he was, and if someone was out there that didn't belong, they either got
protecting the food source.
Yeah, well, they were probably scared. I think these creatures are very well aware of a quid pro quo. I think they know if you're going to do something for them, they're going to do something for you. I've heard some really cool stories about how Bigfoot wasn't habituated, but they would get food or resources from like a person, like usually an older person, and in turn, someone came up on the property that didn't belong there. If something was happening, I don't think you're going to find a better watchdog than a Dogman or a Bigfoot. So, I mean, I would roll in that deal all day.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and if you think about it too, if Dogman is that, and is a canid and has the personality of a canid, a normal dog, but with more intelligence, then it would make perfect sense.
Well, I mean, to me that does make sense because it's not like you're domesticating him. If you've got a Dogman on your property, let's just say, Tiny's got a 100-acre farm in the middle of the North Carolina mountains.
One day I will.
I know, and I'll be right next to you, and we'll both set it up as a sanctuary for Dogman and Bigfoot, and they better take pictures. Anyway. But let's just say that happens, and he knows he's got a Dogman out there, and he throws, or he what was that one story that we used to hear about in New Orleans where the guys would put out a side of beef every week?
Yeah.
And let's just say Tiny takes like a side of beef every week for, just to feed, this Dogman and his family. I'm sure they're either going to get real used to that, and they're going to say, hey, you know what, we better take care of our bread and butter here. It's kind of like, so it's not like you're domesticating them or habituating them. And I guess some people would say you are habituating them, but it's not like they can't go out and get their own food. It's kind of like a peace offering. That's the way I look at it. It's kind of like an offering.
It's living in tandem with what it's doing.
Exactly, because you're keeping them happy, and they're not going to mess with you, which keeps you happy. Because you all know the stories. If you get these things angry, they're pretty much going to destroy your property. They'll kill all your livestock. I mean, there's that, not to keep bringing Dark Waters up, but I am a fan. that siege at Lockhead Ranch. Now, I know that's a story, but that's a good example of what could happen. I mean, those people got their entire farm destroyed, killed. And I have heard of other stories like that. There was one where a guy had been feeding, and I believe it was Bigfoot on this one, but a guy had been feeding Bigfoot for almost 10, 15 years every night. And he had a stroke and ended up in a hospital. And he had a small farm. And in retaliation for them not being fed, this is a reason why you don't feed or habituate, is they slaughtered everything. Like, they killed everything. So, I can see how it goes, but it's a double-edged sword there. It cuts both ways. But, if you're going to be there and that this pacifies them and it's going to keep you from getting livestock killed, that's probably, I'd do it. I mean, I know other cryptozoologists be like, oh, that's the dumbest thing. Well, you're not in my shoes, pal. Yeah. Your livelihood isn't dependent on what's coming out of my farm. Yeah. And that's why a lot of people sit there and they point the finger at the farmer. Oh, you shouldn't have done this. Who are you to judge?
Well, you've really got just a couple options. If you do have Dogman or Sasquatch activity and they're taking your livestock, you have basically two options: kill them or share.
And I would go share, because you can't kill them all.
Yeah, exactly. If you kill one, then the family's going to retaliate.
Yeah, I believe they do vendettas. I'm a firm believer that there is something called a cryptid vendetta. That should be a show right there. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll get some stories together and we'll talk about cryptid vendettas. But Tiny's 100% right. If you do something to them, they're going to do something to you, or to your property, or to your family. It's like you hear all these horror stories about Bigfoot attacking people and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like something we touched on the last podcast, is there's always something that precipitates these events. Yeah. And they usually don't tell you what happened. It's like when here's an example, here's a paranormal example. Tiny and I were investigating a place, and these people that had asked us to look at this place, they knew they had been dabbling in what we would like to call maybe the dark arts. They had a few issues. They neglected to tell us that when we started. Now, again, Tiny's a much more gifted paranormal researcher than I am. In fact, I'm a firm believer that evil is scared of Tiny, because we've actually walked into places and I have seen entities, just shadow creatures, if you will. Tiny walks in a room, boom, they exit. It just happens. I've seen it, so I believe it. But
it makes investigations difficult.
It does. Well, yeah, especially if they're nasty. But my point is this: we didn't get the full story, and and if Tiny hadn't been gifted the way he is, it probably would have had a different outcome. Now, that said, it's the same side with the cryptid world. I've had investigations where I've gone to places and I have seen stacks of garbage in the woods. My friends, I'm talking about, like, it looked like someone took the bags out, dropped them in the woods, opened them up, went through it, and this is just mountains of this stuff. Now, you can't tell me that all this garbage out there just accumulated over one night. I mean, you could see the deterioration. It looked like some of it had been there for years. So my thought process was they knew this thing was going through the garbage. They never did anything about it. They let it happen. That's what a lot of people would call habituation, because they became used to this food source. Yeah. And then the truth comes out. The lady was actually throwing out, putting things in or on top of the garbage, like, leftovers. So she was actually feeding these things. And then when she got put into a nursing facility, her daughter moved in there and was just getting all kinds of trouble. So, it did eventually go away. I think they migrated, but the other thing is that they put up a lot of lighting. That wasn't too far from here. But again, it's an example. But what Tiny and I are talking about is basically it's cohabitating. Because if you have a farm and these things are capable of basically killing everything in one night, let's say you got $70,000, $80,000 worth of livestock. Well, what good is it if it's all dead? Yeah. So if you give up, a side of beef every week, I think it's a fair trade. And you get that protection. I honestly think you'll get protected. I think if anyone comes out there messing with you, or you get poachers or hunters, they're going to be, imagine that being a poacher, all of a sudden you look up, there's a 9-foot dog man and 5 of his brothers sitting there looking at you.
Well, anything's going to protect its food source.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're a food source, I mean, that might be all they see you as is a food source.
Well, not a food source, but the one who provides the food. Yeah.
But do you think that Dogman's omnivorous or strictly a meat eater?
I don't know. Just from what I've seen, like I said, I have seen Dogman. I haven't seen his teeth. I've seen it. There was no growling. And let me tell you something right now. I love it when people tell me that, oh, you could see its teeth through its closed mouth. That's ridiculous. All right, that is ridiculous. I want you guys to think about this.
It's a saber-toothed dog.
It's a saber-toothed dog, man. But I want you guys to think about this. It's something called evolution here. If his teeth are protruding so far out, how is he going to eat? It's good for killing, but that's not good for eating. Think about it. Think about how the dynamics of that work. Think about how the human, think about how your dog's mouth is. He's got big canines,
and
the mouth closes.
The things that have the tusks,
they're in front of their face.
They use them for fighting.
Yeah.
A Dogman that has, God knows what kind of bite force, and arms and hands,
claws.
They're not going to need that.
No, but so I think these people. That's how I kind of think. If you get a report and you say, you could see its teeth through its closed mouth, I'm not buying it. I think that you need to be aware if you hear that, because again, these are natural creatures in my opinion. They're not supernatural. If it was supernatural, it wouldn't need to eat. Thus, they could have the teeth like that. But these are biologic creatures that need to eat. All right, they need to use their mouths. They need to drink, and you can't do that with a mouthful of teeth that you can't open or close all the way or get anything in there. Can you imagine having like tusks? Tiny, and in your butt, you can say your canines, you got tusks. How are you going to eat a cheeseburger? It's not going to work. It's just, it's got to fit. So there's always that. That's always something to look for. Again, we're going to do a podcast.
Devil's in the details.
Exactly. We're going to do a podcast on how to interview someone later on down the road. I think that's probably a pretty good idea too. As well as, what to bring when you're basically just going to do it. We break up our investigations into like three categories. There's like a quick one, or that's just where you're kind of meeting people and you ask them, the who, what, when, here, what, how, why, and how long it's been going on kind of thing. Then there's like a medium investigation where you go for a couple hours, and that's like what would tell you what to bring with you. We always bring a backpack with supplies in it just in case. And then again, there's the overnight longer term ones with what you need to bring. So we'll go all into that, and that's something we cover when we do the IRI symposiums too. So that's something to look forward to. So if you follow at Society Cryptid or CryptidGuy.com, we post all this stuff too, on what's going to happen in current events. And you can also get that on we'll be putting stuff, direct connections to our YouTube channel, and that's Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society. And you just YouTube that, and you'll see that's where we keep this podcast, and that's where you see Beyond Fringe or Beyond Fringe. Even right now, if you just type Beyond Fringe into YouTube, it'll pop up our channel. So pretty excited about that. Just kind of cool to see your hard work come to fruition. You know what I'm saying, Ty?
Yep.
We don't have a whole lot of subscribers or listeners, but I think we've got a good podcast, and I think they'll come.
Well, what's the saying? If you build it, they'll come.
Yes, sir. They do, and they will. Again, I've got another cool Dogman report here. Tiny, do you have any you want to talk about?
I don't.
Okay. This one, this gentleman was on a show talking about this, but I talked to someone that knows him, and this is off the Appalachian Trail.
Imagine
that. Right, yeah, imagine that. Right at Spring. Imagine that. And this happened both in Tennessee and North Carolina. This guy was walking. He was there his whole life. He's a good old boy. He went in the military for a while, and then he came back, and he was taking over the family business. And he was going to hike where he'd been hiking his entire life since he could walk. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom! He looks up, and this 8 to 9 foot Dogman just encompasses the path in front of him. He said this thing just stared at him and started growling. And he said basically he didn't know what to do. He said he was either going to, go down swinging, or he wasn't going to go down at all. So he just stood there. And he said this thing did the weirdest thing. As he was looking at it, the thing kind of moved its head back and forth, side to side. Kind of description of what a puppy does when he looks at something. And then, out of nowhere, he says he hears like another howl or growl not too far away. This thing looks at him, kind of snorts a little bit, turns around, disappears in the woods.
Kind of one of those Saved by the Bell situations.
Well, I think it was either mom or dad saying, "All right, enough, let's go, quit screwing around."
Yeah.
Because I honestly think they like to scare people for entertainment. I don't think a Dogman, unless they're or Bigfoot for this matter, I don't think they will attack or eat a human unless they have to, unless they're like starving. I just don't think we taste good. Yeah. And where this area is, there's so much food. There's so many food sources. I mean, you've got birds, squirrels, chipmunk. I mean, you've got deer, plentiful elk. You've got everything around here.
And I think too, a lot of it, and you're talking about two animals that are apparently very intelligent. So I think that they understand the person's intent. You know, like that guy, him just kind of standing there and not showing the fear. Well, he wasn't getting the reaction that he wanted if he was there just to scare him. And it also, you know, a lot of predators, if you run, that's all it takes. They're on you. That's what they're expecting. But if you stand your ground, a lot of chances they'll back off.
Well, the other thing about this area is about 3 days later, same thing happens to a couple. And then about a week after that, it happens again. And again, there's nothing. The third time it got reported, I heard this from someone that told me he heard it from the park ranger in the area, which I believe because my sources are pretty good. But the whole thing takes around 2 weeks for all three encounters to happen, spread out a little bit more. But when you put it on the map, and we have our sightings map like every good paranoid person has, the map with the red yarn from pin to pin. Yes, I have 2 of those. I'm honest about it. It starts to form a pattern, and these actual sightings are what got me started thinking about putting all of our sightings on a map and seeing if they made any kind of pattern. And lo and behold, this is where the cryptid triangle pattern came from for this area. So these reports actually did help us out with a lot, because all the reports in this area fit in a really nice cluster. And I don't know if it means anything. And again, it's very possible in my mind that there's the underground cave system that the cryptids use for traveling, and it's very possible that the entrance and exit to this area to that tunnel system could be in this area. And that's something that Tiny and I are going to be looking more into this spring. Right now the weather's just, it's not conducive to go out there looking for trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been talking about the intelligence of Dogman. We've been talking about how you believe that they enjoy scaring people just for the fun of it. So let me bring this up and tie it in with an experience of my own and see what you think about it. I can't say that I've ever had a real Dogman experience, because I've never truly laid eyes on it. Don't mean I hadn't. It just means I didn't know it if I did. But I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember which one. And there was a witness on talking about, this was in Europe somewhere where this happened. And there's Dogman reports on every continent except Antarctica.
That's because we're not really down there.
Right. And she said this thing, she was house sitting, and the house, it was one of these, she was house sitting for like a multi-millionaire, and the house was in the middle of the woods, and it was basically all glass.
I heard the same podcast. I know, in Germany.
Yeah. Right. And this thing come out of the woods, and it like creeped around the windows and would tap on the windows and watch her. And had it wanted to, it could come through any of the glass.
It's a window. Right. If it wants to, I mean, these things can pick up the side of a Chevy, you know.
You're right.
I think they can go through window if
so
they want
obviously it was, I would say, communicating and saying, you know, I'm here, be careful, or was just enjoying. Maybe it's a pheromone thing.
It's possible, but you know what? Again, I don't know why I keep bringing up Dark Waters, because I will say this: I am a fan, and I'm not getting anything from him, or I'm not trying to get anything from him. Should I say that either? I don't. You know, he's just. I enjoy what he does, but I listen to a lot of his stories, and you know, and that's. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but he's the one that, from what I remember, he's the one that coined the term cryptid terrorist or crypto terrorist, and I honestly believe that they enjoy scaring us because it makes them laugh. I think it's their source of entertainment. They get a kick out of it.
So, the experience that I want to tie this into and actually get your thought, I don't think we've ever talked about it, but you know, the more that I talk about cryptid experiences and things, the more things I remember, the more things that I go, holy crap, you know. And of course, you know, the place I know that the place I grew up in had Bigfoot activity, you know, and God knows what else, all sorts of things. But I was maybe 6th or 7th grade at the time, and we had went back down for the summer after, you know, we'd moved up here. We went back down for the summer, and I'm sitting in the living room. My parents are in the back bedroom. I'm in the living room, and I hear at the very top of the window in the living room. All right, now I'm 6'6", as tall as I am now. I would still be stretching to tap up there, but I heard it.
Did it sound like a finger or did it sound like a nail?
It was a nail.
Oh,
There's
man.
absolutely no doubt in my mind it was a nail.
I'm telling you, that's a dog, man.
And it happened twice. The first time I stopped and I looked over at the window. The curtains were closed. It was at night. And I looked at the window, and I'm deciding if I should maybe look out or not. And then the second time it happened, I said, nah. And I went back over to my parents.
I don't blame you.
And, you know, I got to thinking about that. Well, hell, maybe that's what it was.
Well, again, the only reason why I say that was probably a dog man, and I'm not jumping at conclusions. I know exactly where Tiny's from, and I know exactly what happens in that area. I know exactly what kind of reports we've gotten in that area. And that particular area, I'm not going to tell them where you're from because that's your business. I've gotten reports of like a 9 to 10 foot dog man. That's by several people there. So that kind of size would not surprise me.
Well, let me ask you this. Sasquatch, you would think, would have some pretty sizable fingernails too.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, from what I understand, they're like chisels. Like they use them for digging. I mean, I'm sure they do. But I think there's a different size dynamic here. Like from what I understand, you know, I'm not an expert. Anyone claiming to be an expert, you know, that's, if you want to listen to them, that's up to you. I don't. But from what I've heard in the Dogman reports I've got, they have like raccoon-like hands, but they all have claws, and they're very sharp and long. Right. So I think if you're hearing, it's like listening to your wife's fingernail tapping the glass kind of thing. Yeah. You know what a fingernail sounds like, as opposed to, you know, there's a difference between and just a kind of thing. Yeah, so
it was definitely a nail.
I would say that's probably a dog man, especially from where your area is. Yeah. As active as that area is, and as much the dense forest. There's an unbelievable amount of dense forest in Tiny's hometown. So I would say it probably did. And I'm telling you, I know we didn't 100% get physical proof that we were being followed that one time when we were in the haunted forest, but I'm a confirmed believer after those tracks were found that they were there and they were watching us, because we had that creepy feeling. Which reminds me, Tiny and I, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but we have this place, and we always give a hotspot a code name. That way no one knows what it is, because it could be, and we'll call something, you know, Candyland or something creepy, and we call this one place, let's talk about the haunted forest a little bit, because you and I are pretty much, I think, probably experts in that area.
Do you want to talk about the haunted forest or the triangle?
Let's talk about the haunted forest, and we'll do triangle another time.
Okay.
So, Tiny and I get a tip about someone. Actually, you know what, Tiny? I've been talking a lot. You're much better at recalling the details on this, because you're the one that actually brought this to our attention. So why don't you give them the background on this, and I'll just fill in little bits and pieces as we go.
Well, the haunted forest is probably one of the more interesting forest places I've been. It was shown to me by a friend, and he said that every time he goes in there that he feels like he's being watched. And my professional background has taught me a lot about people. It's taught me how to read people. I read body language really well. And when I met the fella and went into the woods with him, I had no doubt he was being honest with everything he was saying. And he told me, he said, I don't know what it is. He said, I've never physically seen anything. He said, I've heard some things. He said, but mostly it's a feeling I get. And I'm very much at ease in the woods. It's very rare for me to be concerned in the woods, just because of my raising.
Well, let me just, if I can put a little footnote on that. I've been in the woods with Tiny I can't count how many times. And you talk about someone that isn't. Tiny's not even happy until he's usually in the woods. That's when he comes alive. That's when you see, happy Tiny all the time. And the truth of the matter is, it's hard for him to keep his shoes on because what he likes to do is walk around in the barefoot. Which that's
called grounding. It's really good for you.
That's called hillbilly, but that's a different story. But anyway, that's Tiny's not happy unless he's in the woods. In fact, I remember one time there's just creek and it just got done raining and there's like garbage flowing through it, and he's like, I think I'm gonna get myself a drink. I'm like, Tiny, don't do that. But anyway, he's not happy till he's in the woods, and that's when you see the true ability of my friend here. And it's very impressive. But anyway, I just want to put that little footnote in there.
Thank you.
Well, it's true.
The forest is definitely my church.
It is, definitely.
But anyway, we're traveling back in this place, and he had a certain destination in mind, and I'm not going to name it like he did. But
it's what we're both thinking, though, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was perfect for camping. Absolutely perfect for camping.
Oh, it is.
And it butted up to the Land and Sea Trail. Mm-hmm. Coincidentally, and which also butts up to the Appalachian Trail.
You just kind of.
No, I said it butts up to it. There's several places it does.
All
that.
right. Well. Oops.
There's several.
I'm waiting for the knock on the door now.
Yeah. But anyway, we're traveling back through there, and we travel a total, I think, of 3 miles.
It was 3 miles in.
3 miles out.
It was 3 miles in. Then we walked around for about another mile. So 3.5, 4 miles in.
Yeah, and when we got to a certain point, the gentleman that took me in there got really nervous. I could see it, and he said, "This is where." And interestingly enough, he said, after you step over this little creek, there's water everywhere. And paranormally speaking, water is a barrier. Thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. It does a lot of different.
Isn't it protection? Like some spirits can't cross across.
It carries energy. It does a lot of different things. But he said when you step over this area, this little spring, he said that's when you'll start to feel it.
Prior to that, if I may, because prior to that, now when we go out, we always bring a couple meters.
Yeah.
We bring a tri-field EM meter, and. Did I bring the the radiation detector unit?
You did, yeah.
We just stopped maybe 3 miles in before we went across this, and just to do it, we took a reading, and we put it on it was on the sum setting, right?
Yeah.
The natural EM, tri-field natural EM meter, put it on the sum setting, and honestly, I was just doing it to do it, see if there was anything out there, because at this point, I don't even think we had cell signal.
No.
There was
we
nothing.
Lost cell signal before we ever got out and started walking.
I mean, so there's nothing out there, and all of a sudden, the meter just starts, boom, it was pegging out, hitting 10, right, and it just stops.
It's up on that little overlook we were.
It was up, and then it stays at 9. I thought it had broke, and then I said, just for just the scientist
in
me,
in the triangle.
Exactly, and just to ease my curiosity, I have a radiation detector. Starts going nuts. Starts to go nuts. And then it just stops. And then we walk about 5 feet away. Starts to go nuts. Then it stops. So that happened 2 or 3 times. And then, we said, it's time to get out of here just in case it's it's radioactive. And then we continued to walk. So,
we went back in there, and it did change. Like the air.
Yeah, it did.
The air changed. I didn't particularly feel like I was being watched at that time. He got real nervous, but it did change. It was different. And when we got to our destination,
this is with you and the other guy.
Yeah,
this is when you.
I hadn't even got to when we weren't up in there yet. When we got to our destination, it was like walking into a bubble. It was the only way that I can describe it. And coincidentally, too, I forgot to mention that there was no animal sign, no sounds, no nothing. It was food everywhere that was going to waste. We got to that destination, and it was like walking into a bubble. I've never experienced that before. And when you entered that bubble, it was like the best way that I can describe it is it sounded like there was thousands of birds everywhere, but just outside of your hearing. Like if you're in a room and you're hearing them outside and you walk over and you open a window, all that sound's going to flood in. And when me and you went back up there, I actually took a recorder with me.
Yeah.
And it didn't catch anything. Was the interesting part. But I've been up there actually more than you have. I think I've been up there probably a total of 5 times. And every time but one, it was exactly the same. When me and you went up there the first time, that's when we found the tree with the chunks pulled out of it across the...
Yeah, there's pictures of that. If you go to Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com and you look under... We just put pictures under evidence or possible evidence. You'll see there's some huge logs. Those were fresh logs. They were oak.
Yeah.
They weren't rotting. They were like you could use them as firewood. That's how good they were. And there's chunks taken out of them, just like looks like some massive handprint just came. And like right prior to the hands, it looks like there's claw marks in there, and it's like ripping a chunk of the wood out. I mean, it's whatever did that had to be just unbelievable. It was like the Incredible Hulk was in there. And
the next week when we went up there, it was gone.
And the next week we were gone. That was gone. There was a few more incidences. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I will talk about something that we both saw that to this day neither one of us can explain. We were on the way back, and we had gotten some pretty good pictures and some good evidence, and we were both pretty happy about that. And like I said, Tiny's got this gift. He knows when Tiny's in the woods, he's like he's got like a radar. He's got built-in radar. He knows when something's going on. He knows what to listen for. Again, he's just that's his natural element.
He's an old country boy.
Yeah, and that's the best kind of person to be in the woods with is an old country boy, in my opinion, because they know what they're doing. And I had this feeling like we were being watched too, but I thought it was some people we had passed earlier that went a completely different direction. And that's a whole different story. I don't even want to get into that one because I still can't explain how that shook out either. But we kept looking. We were walking. Actually, I can tell you exactly. We were walking east, and Tiny kept looking kind of like northwest over his shoulder. And I'd stop, and you got to understand this path we're on was completely overgrown. Tiny's not a small guy, and he was like having to bend down. I mean, the bushes and the trees and everything just kind of, it made like a little, almost did look like a tunnel. Looked like a forest tunnel.
Yeah.
Looked like that. And we were just getting stuff out of our way, and every once in a while you'd see a clearing like higher up, and there'd be like a peak of the mountain. And all of a sudden, Tiny just stops. In fact, I walked right into him because I was looking where my feet were going. Because I'm not a fan of snakes, and this would have been the snake's paradise. And I actually bumped into him, and I stopped, and he's like, shh. And we both look up, or I'm looking up to where he's looking up, and I'll let you take it from there, because I still...
That was there in the little amphitheater.
Yeah.
We talked about, yeah. And we saw 2 different things.
Yeah.
And what I saw was this lonely little pitiful bush, and it was moving. It was shaking like there was something in it. And I was watching it trying to figure out what it might be. You know, it could have been anything. It could have been a squirrel. It could have been God knows what. And I wanted to know, but it was just the one little sorry bush. And I could not fathom why it was the only thing moving. Wasn't any wind blowing.
And it was moving like something was something was shaking it.
And you know, I called you over to look at it, and I said, "Do you see what I'm seeing?" And you said, "What, that shimmer?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "What shimmer?" And we were both seeing. You know, I was seeing it move. He was seeing the freaking predator.
That to this day, that I still don't know. Well, you saw when I pointed out to you, you saw that distortion. There was like this massive distortion standing next to that bush. I think that's what was shaking it, and it was like the light had been bent, and the only way we can describe it is from the movie Predator. It had that same... Now, I wasn't hearing that thing, but we just saw this distortion. And it was definitely bipedal. It had shoulders, arms, head, and it was massive. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, that thing was staring at us. because that's when other weird stuff started happening. When I don't even think we need to there's some things that happened we're not going to talk about because it was just too weird.
Well, and that same day when we got to the destination, that's when you drew on something.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that either. That was something that got weird. It was very the amount of endorphins and adrenaline dumps that day was pretty. I was tired after that day. I'll tell you that.
It was, and we also had time loss up there.
Yeah, we had a lot of time loss. I think we lost 2 hours because we were trying to figure out how far we had gone.
Yeah.
And remember, none of the digital equipment's working. We had complete power failure on everything that was battery powered, included cameras, GoPros, any kind of detection units that were working prior to us going to the specific area. Just died. Everything. And when we got out, everything just kicked back on like there was no problems.
I think there was several different things happening in that area.
Yeah, I do too, and we will be back in there eventually.
I think part of it is it's sacred land.
I am not opposed to thinking that either because, as we've said before, again, Tiny being the paranormal expert he is, and I will call him an expert, we knew that there was a possibility this had been Native American land that had been used for, I guess what we call their spiritual rites. And we brought offerings of tobacco, and we both gave it, and told them we were here to just enjoy the beauty of the area, and we meant no harm or disrespect. I am a firm believer in doing that. I don't want anyone in the paranormal realm or in this realm thinking we're being rude for no reason.
Well, you anytime you're dealing with anything, you need to show respect.
Exactly, I agree with that.
And especially if there's any possibility that it's a sacred spot, used to be a sacred spot, still is a sacred spot, whatever, you need to show respect. I mean, just because. If you don't, then, bad stuff could happen.
I am a firm believer. And you know what? What does it hurt? Even if you don't believe, what's so wrong about taking 2 seconds out of your life to show respect to those who came before you?
Yeah.
I'm just a firm believer. And again, I think that's a lot that just has to do with the paranormal belief. And I bring that into the cryptid world too. Yeah. Because I'll tell you straight up, there have been times where, we've been in the woods. I have heard things. I've grabbed for a gun, and then I've heard more footsteps come around. I put the gun away, put the hands up, head down, and slowly back out. And I've been growled at doing this, and the second I do that, the growling stops. Yeah. That feeling of, I guess, terror.
Yeah.
Like that, that Charmin moment that you're worried about, that goes away. The air, you can start breathing again. It's like the danger's gone because, as the aggressor, because you're trespassing into their territory, you have just de-escalated the situation. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in doing that.
That's the thing, too. And it's the arrogance of the human condition. We're walking into their house.
Exactly. That is their house.
And we need to respect that. Just like we would expect anybody to respect their house if they come into it. And the difference is, they could toss us over the hill real easy.
Oh, it wouldn't even be a thing for them. We'd never be found.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. That, and when you keep that in the back of your mind, that a little bit of respect will probably get you home at night.
Yeah.
It's not such a big deal. Well, my friends, this is going to end this chapter in our podcast. Thank you for listening. And again, if anyone wants to get in touch with us, you can get us at 828-407-0046, or you can email at us anytime, day or night. You can email us or call us at beyondfringe001@gmail.com. And again, our phone number is 828-407-0046. I'm the Cryptid Guy. As with me as always is Daniel Tiny Hurst. Keep believing. See you next time.